guys and gals at TNP, it's your boy M back with another episode of RP Spotlight. Today we have our guest, Arcanstotska. Very happy to have him. He's a very promising newer face in the RP. Ark, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty good, doing pretty chill. I'm glad to be on here. Glad to be here to talk about Arcanstotska and share a few jokes, probably.
Awesome, man. I'm glad to hear it. I've been looking forward to this show. So I kind of like to ask our guests first of all, how did you come to nation states and to TNPRP community in general?
Well, when it comes to coming to nation states, it's a very short story. Basically, I was in the sixth grade, sitting at my desk in world history class, bored out of my mind, and just random thought came to me. I want my own country. And so I went onto my school issued Chromebook and I bumped into nation states and I made my account, which is known as Arkanstotska. As In terms of how I came to the North Pacific, that's a slightly longer and honestly a bit more embarrassing story. Um, you see, I had been on nation states since October of 2016. So it's a bit of a it's a I've been on here for a bit. But, you know, the Pacific regions came across as like these big, you know, rush hour chat regions. So I mostly just stayed away from them until very recently. Now, in like I think it was August or early September of last year, um I met Reith or Aki, the dude with the bird profile picture.
Yes, sir.
I met him in yeah, I met him. It is kind of embarrassing to admit, but I met him in a furry Discord server because away from TNP, I'm a part of that whole show. Um, and he was talking about fictional countries. And I DM'd him. Was like, you do fictional country roleplay? And he was like, yeah. Like, oh, do you know about nation states? Yeah. Like, what region are you in? The North Pacific. Oh, the North Pacific, one of those big ones. And I came here to check it out. And I've kind of stayed here since. Like, I like the community. I really like the settings. I love the community. Uh, it's been a blast ever since I came here.
Good. We're really glad to have you here. You've been a really fantastic addition. Uh, so today with you, we're speaking about Arkanstotska, which is part of the Eris map, the Eris RP. What really drew you to Eris RP?
I was drawn to Eris roleplay because what people have been saying about it, at least to me, is that it's based on cooperation, mutual cooperation in storytelling, which was a very attractive idea to me after spending a few years in very competitive roleplay groups where it was a military. Uh, I don't want to say it, but a military wank measuring contest where people are constantly like competing over my army's better, no, my army's better, my empire is better, no, mine. It was so exhausting. For a while, I even dropped NS until I came back very, very recently for nostalgia's sake and because I was bored. Um, but yeah, the cooperative storytelling has really drawn me in because you can't no one can just like walk up to your country and just like smack it to the ground after you've done so much to build it up, and the competitiveness is non-existent, so the setting doesn't get exhausting. uh I've been happy with Eris, and I've had a blast since joining, and it's been a very enjoyable little thing to do.
Cool. So before we get into talking about the RP that I'd like to ask you, I'd like to ask, what really inspired your nation, like on a cultural, political, societal kind of levels, like all of those?
In terms of culture, I don't know why, but I've always had this like in the back of my mind interest in Russia. Its culture, its history, all that fun stuff. So what I wanted to do with Arcanstotskan culture, at least initially, was I wanted to sort of envision what would Russian culture look like without the sort of cultural and like stagnation of the Soviet Union and all the stuff that came with the Soviet Union. So a sort of like Western Russia, dare I say. Now, in terms of how that's been going on, I haven't really been able to do much because school has, you know, been keeping my attention primarily, and there are some other, as well as other TNPRP projects of mine. But it's kind of evolved from this sort of just Western Russia to include, the Ilkentiks, which are supposed to be a completely original and unique cultural group which lived in what is now Arkanstotska prior to the Slavs arriving in uh, several thousand years ago. So Arkanstotskan culture is kind of up in the air at the moment. I have vague ideas, but I haven't been entirely sure how to put them to paper yet. In terms of Arkanstotska's politics, throughout my time in nation states, I've always stuck to role playing like an absolute monarchy just for simplicity's sake. And I wanted to do something different. Like I wanted to try something I've never really done before. So I decided I wanted to do a sort of democratic republic. Um, so yeah.
Is it democratic or is it like quote unquote democratic?
Oh yeah, it's an actual democracy. It's not the kind of country that like calls itself a democracy to look like a democracy. We're not North Korea.
Fair enough. So, uh, so you have written uh, a fairly long running now RP about the West Vasa conflict. Let's chat a little bit about that.
Yes.
Let for our audience members, give them a bit of a quick summary of that about how that's going so far.
So in early 2020, there was this country, at least to my knowledge, in Crowder, in Arkansas's neck, it's called Arion. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but there's my attempt at saying its name. I was in early 2020. Norcia, Heighton, and Arkanstotska decided that they would split Arion between the three of them. Norcia, to my knowledge, got the lion's share of the pie. Heighton got North and East Vasa, while Arkanstotska got the scraps, which ended up being West Vasa. Now, following the Arkanstotskan invasion of what was left of Arion, though this has sadly yet to be canonized in an RP post, there's a referendum issued out to the West Vasan people following the defeat of whatever the heck was left of Arion's military forces, in which the West Vasa voted to either have their own country or become an Arkanstotskan province. The majority voted in favor of the latter, which left a portion of the former to be very set with the results. An underground terrorist movement began to brew, which sought violent separation from Arkanstotska. There was, initially going to be a peaceful independence movement, but they kind of got overshadowed by these terrorists before they could actually do the thing. These terrorists were being supplied and funded by a general Bozkurt out of Aiden, who was looking to distract Cravader and the world from happenings in Aiden while he attempted to secure power within Aiden amid the growing democratic movement. On September 15th, 2020, the West Vossen terrorist group, known as the West Vossen Free State, launched a terrorist attack on the Arcanstotskan coastal city of Romolensk, in which they hijacked an airliner and basically pulled a 9/11 and crashed it into the Romolensk maritime port facilities and whatnot. And then, they announced their intentions to violently break away from Arcanstotska. Since then, the Arcanstotskan military, along with Malor Canada, Mintoria, and the Norsean Air Force, have been engaged in a prolonged guerrilla war trying to, push these terrorists towards Yelimki, which is a coastal city in West Vasa, and eventually, defeat them. I currently have planned to do soon the Battle of Yelimki roleplay arc, the series of posts that will go into that, and then once that's done, the roleplay will be concluded. But yeah, that's the general, in-character gist of the West Vasa War.
Alright. So, from that, it does sound like you have a fairly good relationship with your neighbors on Cravader and Calandris, and let's kind of touch on that a little bit. You are a member of the Laskova Pact as well as the Cravader Economic Alliance. Can you kind of expand on your role within those for us?
So, Arcanstotska's goal and aim and role, hopefully, in these organizations is, well, Arcanstotska, what it wants to do is it wants to become a shining beacon of international cooperation and mutual economic prosperity and all this good stuff. So joining those two organizations is kind of the nation's way to do that. It's looking to put itself out there in terms of economic influence and also help build, a more peaceful and cooperative and economically prosperous international community.
Okay. It also sounds like you have quite the awkward relationship with Aiden as well.
Yes. Awkward might be putting it lightly, but yes.
So with Aiden, do Gap and yourself have any kind of future plans to really push against one another following the West Boston?
Well, I don't know about pushing against each other. We haven't really done anything about that, but what we do have planned is, following the conclusion of the Battle of Yelinki and the defeat of the West Vossen Free State, um, Arkanstotskan and Aidini intelligence services are going to be working together to track down whoever was responsible for getting the terrorists all this money and guns and ammo. And that's going to lead to them discovering Boskurt and his naughty activities and what he's been up to. And what will essentially happen is there's going to be a sort of Osama bin Laden compound raid type thing where Arkanstotskan and Aidini special forces go in, kill Boskurt, and the whole thing. In terms of diplomacy, what with the recent discovery of Aidini's military equipment and, monetary assets in the possession of the terrorists, diplomatic tensions are well, let's just say the Arkanstotskan nation is very unamused. It's very uppity at the moment.
Uppity. I think that's the best political position that one can have. Uh, so with Arcanstotska, you've talked about it being based around like a Western Russia kind of thing. So what is the language like, and like to what point have you kind of built the language up?
Well, the language is the language. You know, most of the population speaks Obshi Yashk. I'm definitely mispronouncing that, but Eris is equivalent to Russian. That's spoken by the majority of the population, and it's kind of like merged kind of with the native Ilkentic language, that being Pekisko, which is a conlang that I have unfortunately yet to work on because I've never worked on a conlang before, and that's kind of intimidating. So it's like a kind of mix of Russian bits and pieces of like this conlang language, as these peoples have kind of like lived together for centuries under the same flag.
It it sounds like the two societies have kind of meshed very well with each other over time. The what are some of the more traditional kind of Arkanstotskan values that one would find?
Traditional values would include things like honesty, courage, uh, pride, honor, uh, especially honor in family honor. You don't want to disgrace the family name. That especially ties into the Ilkentic peoples and you know all that. Healthy eating habits. That especially ties into Arkanstotska via uh, the very old Ilkentic traditions and their religion, their native religion of Draconism, which has a special emphasis on healthy eating habits. So healthy eating is a very like traditional thing in Arkansas. Like people who actually like care about tradition within the country, they care about all that traditional values. You don't really see them going up to your local fast food joint ordering a Whopper.
Fair enough. So you did mention your national religion. Tell us about that. I always love hearing about these religions that
So
people have in their nations.
so Draconism, it's not really the national religion of Arkansas, considering it's a secular state. That's national. It shuns the notion of a nationally enforced religion, but it does have a long history within Arkanstotska. Essentially, it is a religion based around dragon worship. The gods are dragons, um, and it kind of ties in with what I did in a previous setting. I was in a medieval fantasy setting where I was basically a human kingdom worshipped dragons. Back then, I called it draconism. So when I came to Eris, I was kind of inspired to like try to bring that back. Um, one very interesting thing about it is like it's the Draconist idea of like the afterlife. Like it's taking the phrase "you are what you eat" to like a new height. Like this is why Draconists have such a heavy emphasis on healthy eating. Like if you eat bad food, it corrupts your being. It will affect who you are in a negative way, not just physically, but potentially emotionally, psychologically, in terms of your behavior and all that stuff. Now, the reason that is because Draconists believe that human souls will be eaten by either Denirol, which is the sort of quote unquote good god, or Naldine, which is a quote unquote bad god because it's a ditheistic religion. And by being consumed by one or the other, the idea is that your consciousness, your soul is infused into theirs while your physical body is digested. So you essentially become a part of God. either God's good side or his bad side. And so ideally you want to be part of his good side, so you eat healthy and all that. Drycanism, well, it makes up like 12% of the population if I'm remembering stuff correctly, but I sadly have yet to like make a post in ESP's religion thread officially canonizing it, but it's definitely an idea I've been playing around with for a while. I've been very excited to get that into RP eventually. I just haven't like found the inspiration or the time just yet.
So, what would a like a Draconist ceremony or like a temple or a church like?
Well, Draconism is a very out in the open religion. I kind of wanted to take inspiration from sort of like old Norse and Celtic uh, paganistic polytheism. So you have, outdoor ceremonies, you have animal sacrifices to the gods. You have like feasts, you have drinking, you have like fortune telling. That's something I wanted to include. You have you have a lot of like all this paganistic stuff. Paganism has been a very large inspiration for Draconism.
So, I have a quick audience question here from Gap. Uh, what is the current situation with Meravism in Arcanstotska? Meravism being Eris equivalent of Islam.
Marabism currently it makes up last time I checked 2.7% of the entire population, which I would assume, given if Gap is willing to permit such a thing, mostly from Idini immigrants. Um, the you can
Hold on one moment. I believe I've lost. Sorry for that. I lost connection for a moment.
no biggie.
Anyways, continue on.
So yeah, Marabism is by all means legal to practice in Arkanstatska. The government isn't allowed to illegalize a religion unless it's like a death cult or something. Sorry for cutting out there.
A death cult, something
Uh,
like.
yeah, so that's basically Marabism's.
So a death cult, something as the Imperium Swawadiki has.
Yes. Yeah, that's probably gonna earn looks from government authorities. Yeah, the Imperial Blood Cult isn't really gonna be a thing in Arkanstatska legally. That's illegal. You can't like religiously kill people. You can't like religiously cut people. You can't like religiously sacrifice people. You can't do any of that in Arkanstatska. That's illegal. So the Blood Cult is very much not welcome here.
Very good. Another audience question from one of our audience regulars, for DJ. What is the state of Arkanstotska's foreign relations at this time?
Well, that's kind of vague. Do you mean like Arkanstatska's stand specific events in the international community, or how it generally wants to approach the international community, like what
We'll
it's set
go with
out to
how it
accomplish, what
generally
it wants
wants
to
to
do?
approach.
So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but generally what Arkanstatska wants to do is it wants to solidify itself as a major economic player on the international stage. It wants to kind of stand as a beacon, a shining light of, you know, international cooperation and economic prosperity to which other nations might aspire to be like. It wants to help other countries become like that, and it generally wants to like promote international cooperation to a greater degree. As the it's like as the motto says, prosperity, fraternity, uh, all that stuff. That's what Arcanstotska aims for on the international stage.
All right. So I'm curious. We've touched on politics, religion, society, and some of your inspirations. Do your inspirations with Russia also kind of extend to the architecture and the makeup of cities and towns in Arkansas?
So I have not put a whole lot of thought into Arkanstotskan architecture. I do want to include like traditional like Russian elements, like the domes, the all that good stuff. But I also want to include a lot of like Western elements, like in like Roman architecture, Greek architecture, general Western European architecture, as well as elements of Russian and Slavic architecture to create this sort of like mix, you could say.
Okay. So what is the structure of the Arkanstotskan government, like from the top down? How does it work?
So, Arkanstotska is officially termed as a federal semi-constitutional, uh, no, my bad, federal semi-presidential constitutional republic. So, the control of the nation is sort of divided between, the different constituent entities, your provinces, your cities of national importance, and Ilkentic tribal administrations, which are like autonomous, tribal governments. You have your typical like three branches of government. You have the legislative branch, the National Assembly, which is currently bicameral, but I've considered switching it to unicameral instead. You have the executive branch, the president, the head of state. He represents the country. You have your prime minister who does all the government stuff, and then you have your judicial branch with like the National Constitutional Court, the national all this sort of courts to keep the government from doing constitutional violations. And you also have something that was actually in Hungary, the the National Fiscal Council, which is intended to keep government spending from going too crazy. Provide some oversight from that, independent oversight. You've got your national government, your provincial governments, your county governments, and they're all their legislatures, which add up to the next.
So
I haven't really done a lot to touch on Arkanstotskan politics, admittedly, since like I don't pay attention to real life politics since it's very hostile here in the United States. What with all this political tension, so I've kind of stayed away from that, which has cost me in knowledge of how politics works and on this sort of scale. So it's been very intimidating to address these sort of things, admittedly. But there's the basic like gist of Arkansas's political setup.
so I will say this for both your benefit and anybody listening. In this community, if you're having issues with knowledge on really anything, political structure, conlang, whatever, there are people here that will help you. All you got to do is ask. We're a pretty good community like that. So you mentioned it's semi-presidential. So how often is a new president elected?
The new president is elected once every 5 years, and they can serve a maximum of 2 consecutive terms, similar to the United States.
And who is the current president of Arcanstotska?
Sidorov Pavlovich is the current sitting president of the Second Arcanstotskan Republic. He has been president since 2019.
And has he been an effective leader up to this point?
He has been doing his best to lead the country through the current crisis in West Vasa. He's been doing his best to like keep people calm. Given that he's simply the head of state, he doesn't really have a lot of abilities to affect like military decisions. But he has been keeping a calm face to sort of reassure people that everything's going to be a-okay. He's been doing his best within his ability to ensure that Arcanstotska has a better future ahead of it. And the people love him for that. The people generally like him for that.
So we have a question relating to that from Predice about the 2 consecutive terms. So can they leave a term in between and then serve another 2 consecutive?
No. You either do 1 or you do 2 consecutively. You don't get to do. What's the name of that one U.S. president who did that? You don't get to do it like him, where you do 1 term and then a few people do their terms and then you do another term. You don't get to do that. That would violate the Constitution.
Grover Cleveland.
Yeah, Grover Cleveland. My bad.
But all right. So another topic I kind of like to touch on. What kind of state is Arcanstotska's military?
Ooh, the military. I'm kind of interested you asked. So Arcanstotska isn't meant to have like this big, strong, police the world navy. I wanted to give up on that when I did Arcanstotska because doing military things I figured would be very exhausting. And besides that, I knew there was going to be other people who I'd have to compete with for the influence abroad and all that stuff. Now, even though I found out that TNPRP and Eris aren't competitive communities like the ones I had been in, I still decided, what, I'm not going to have Arcanstotska be this giant military juggernaut. I want its main power to be in the economy. In terms of like the current status of the military, definitely the biggest elements in terms of like how much funding they're getting from the government are the intelligence services and the army, considering the West Vasa ordeal. Next up would be the Air Force. That's kind of in second place, and in last place you have the Navy, the Arkanstotskan Navy, which is purely for coastal defense. It's not meant to go out and police the waters. It's just here to defend Arkanstotskan territorial waters, and that's it.
So with the military, what is the deadliest unit within your military?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I had been thinking on that idea for a while. Uh, it would definitely have to be the Army's Special Operations Service, which is it's kind of like it was inspired by like the SAS, the British SAS, the United States Navy's SEAL teams, but it's an extremely small special forces unit. There's 3 teams of 6 operatives, and that's it. Um, so yeah, basically, my idea for them was like they're this incredibly small unit, but they're among the best of the best, if not the best, in terms of special forces. That's my general idea for them. I don't know if I can actually make that happen, but yeah, they're meant to be like when the bad guys hear about the special operations service, they pee their pants. That's the general idea that I want for them. That's the kind of what I want them to invoke.
Okay. And so you've also like mentioned that the Navy is just there kind of for coastal defense. Is that more just like smaller patrol boats, larger ships? What's up with that?
Um, so the Ark I haven't really world built, the how what kind of ships are present within the Arkanstotska Navy. I do know for the fact that we do not have aircraft carriers at all. We have no aircraft carriers, period. Uh, because that would kind of like go against what I want to do. We don't have global reach. We can just stay at home and that's it. But you definitely have a bunch of patrol boats. You definitely have a bunch of like smaller ships, but you don't have any of the big stuff. You don't have it you don't have aircraft carriers. You don't have like battle cruisers. You don't have any of that. You have smaller ships.
So another audience question here. What sort of damage has the armed forces taken in the West Bosset?
So the army has taken a lot of casualties, leading up to by the end of the battle. By the end of the war, they would have taken a lot of casualties. I don't have exact numbers, but considering the fact that like the West Boston separatists are attempting a guerrilla campaign, similar to like as best as you could imitate the Viet Cong without a jungle. Um, yeah, there's heavy casualties in the army. The Air Force and the Navy have it better. The Navy, excuse me, has it a lot better, even though like the West Boston terrorists have attempted to. I don't know if this was canonized yet, but they have attempted to. My idea is that they have attempted to commandeer warships with varying degrees of success. In terms of material losses, there has been there has been like, I'd assume, tens of maybe hundreds of millions of IBUs worth of material damage, especially in the heavily urbanized regions. And all the bombing runs, the North Sea bombing campaign over West Vasa, that's done a lot of damage. That's done a lot of damage to urban infrastructure, rural infrastructure, in an attempt to cripple the separatists' ability to fight. So there has been a lot of damage in West Vasa.
So at this point, I'd kind of like to open up the floor to uh, audience questions. And if it's all right with Art, we'll just kind of throw anything at him, get him to think on his feet a little bit here.
Yep.
All right, here's one from Prodigia.
Make me think.
Is there a government plan to revitalize West Vasa?
Yes, there is a plan. Uh, we dump a whole bunch of money into reconstruction efforts. Kind of like try these terrorists, ringleaders, whoever many have been captured. Uh, Generally just rebuild the region, reestablish Arkanstotskan government authority, and kind of rebuild the region, make it on par with, say, you know, say Western Arkanstotska, or the Central Arkanstotska, known as the Yulia Valley, in terms of like economic prosperity and like its infrastructure quality. Generally, just rebuild the region and establish uh, government control again.
So here's one from Gap. What is the current public and governmental opinion on the involvement of foreign entities in West?
In terms of Malor Canada and Norcia, the public reception and the government reception have been very, very, very positive. We of course welcome our foreign friends and their help in these trying times. As for Aiden, Aiden. I actually wrote a news article about this. About there are currently a bunch of protests rocking the nation because the people are outraged that you know the Aidanese government is supposedly backing these terrorists. Like people are attacking, immigrant communities. People there were even protests right outside the Aidanese embassy in the capital city of Siloyev. The public reception to that has been very, 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 very negative.
We have one from Pry. What convinced the Second Arcanstotska Republic to back the FRE in the Prydanian Civil War, and was it a difficult choice?
So, the SAR, the Second Arkanstotskan Republic, recognized the FRE as the legitimate Pridanian government following, the confirmation in 2013 that the Syndicalist Republic was doing some very naughty things to the civilian, to like the average people, like their war crimes, all that bad stuff. Prior to that, you know, it was a very heated thing once the Civil War like really got going. Like at first people wanted to support the Syndicalist Republic because they overthrew the fascist government of Anders III, um, especially the Syndicalist Front, which is a Syndicalist party in the National Assembly, as well as the Communist Party known as the Union of Arkanstotskan Communists, as well as some members of the Liberty and Labor Party, which is a sort of social democratic party slash democratic socialist. Sidorov Pavlovich of the National Fraternity Party, which is the Liberals, was among the few prior to 2013 and the confirmation of syndicalist atrocities who advocated, basically screw the syndicalists. King Tobias is where it's at. The FRE is where it's at. So he was among a minority up until the syndicalists' naughty doings were revealed to the wider world. And obviously, once that was revealed, it was hardly a choice at all. Like even the syndicalist front shut up about it, and they were just, what, uh, screw the syndicalist republic, fine, FNU, we're on board.
Okay. And what do relations with Prydania look like now? Now that Tobias Lothbrok is back on the throne and everything.
Well, what with Arkanstotska joining the Luskova Pact and the CEA, our mutual relationship between diplomatic relationship between Arkanstotska and Pridania are looking to be very positive. Pry and I haven't exactly roleplayed the specifics of what Arkanstotska and Pridanian relations look like, but the general consensus between us both is that they're pretty positive right now. The countries, the Kingdom of Pridania and the Second Arkanstotskan Republic are on very good footing at the moment.
Another one from Pradiche. What is the national sport of Arkanstotska, if there is one?
There isn't a national sport, but hockey is definitely um up on the high list. It's definitely one that's growing in popularity. There's also baseball and basketball. That's growing as well. Uh, Another thing is there's also a growing public interest among like uh, teenagers and young adults of airsoft, which I kind of wanted to put in there as like a little thing because I enjoy airsoft in real life, so I want to kind of fit that into my country. So airsoft is a growing thing in Arkanstotska,
Okay.
as well as the others.
So kind of linking into that one, Who would be the most popular athlete?
Ooh, I actually haven't thought about that, considering I've done very, very, very little in terms of Arcanstotska sports. Uh, I don't actually have an answer to that one. I'm sorry.
Hey man,
I
no
haven't really
worries.
engaged in any sports role plays. So,
So
an answer to that question is definitely something on my to-do list.
good. What is the most well-known food in Arkanstotska?
Ooh, hmm. That's another thing I haven't really thought about. My guess would be, like, um, I haven't thought about that before. Um, I, I actually don't have an answer to that. Damn. I mean, sorry.
Well, that's
But
well,
it would generally be something very healthy, tying into what I said earlier about, general Arkanstotskan cuisine. It's a lot of very healthy stuff.
okay. Uh, Gap has asked a question about the question. And he has just simply asked, beet soup?
Beet soup. Uh, I mean, it's a thing in Arkansas. I can't really comment on its popularity, but it's definitely a thing. Uh,
I believe he
Especially in like rural communities. That's pretty popular in the rural parts of the nation.
So, another one from Perdice. Does the Arkanstotskan royal family still exist? And if so, what are they doing nowadays?
That's I'm glad you asked that because I've talked over this with Norcia. The old house of Aksakov, which was in charge of Arkanstotska from the 1500s up until the 1807 revolution, and then for 30 years between the wars of the Callistian Republic and the start of the Second Republic. Uh, they're currently in exile in Norcia, for the most part. I'd assume some other elements were in exile in other countries. I think I've brought this up with Saint-Ton with Kyle before, but I can't really remember if it was that or something else. But yes, they still exist, but obviously they're not in power anymore. And if they come to Arkanstotska, then they wouldn't be arrested, but they'd just be treated as like very wealthy normal people.
So, I think I just have one last question for you here. So, with everything that you've actually, I got a couple here. So, for everything that you've world built and everything that you've done so far, what do you see the future of Arkanstotska looking like?
Uh, the future of Arkanstotska, that's a good question, honestly. Um, I honestly don't know. Uh, I'm just looking to see where the future takes Arkanstotska.
And so, in this community, we've got a lot of fantastic. But is there, one person or a couple people in particular that you really look up to as, leaders, world builders, etc. in this?
I look up to a few people. I look up to Esp, I look up to Kyle, and I look up to Pry, especially like Kyle and Pry and Esp in terms of like writing quality. I've been hard on myself in the past about like the quality of my writing and my writing abilities, and they've served as very much an inspiration to like this is something I can be if I just continue to write. I can write like these guys eventually if I put in the work, and they've been a huge inspiration to me in my writing, and I'm very glad that they've opened the door to me for all of this improvement. They've helped open that door up. I'm very thankful for that.
I will add those are the three people that really kind of helped me break into this as well, and they've been really fantastic. Oh, here's a here's a question from Esp actually. As a nation with coastlines on two separate bodies of water, which coast, east or west, does Arcanstotska prioritize? The Auburn Channel or the Phoenix Sea? And why?
Um, we definitely prioritize the Phoenix Seymour because that's the coast with the city of Romolensk, the one that was recently attacked in the totally not 9/11. Um, it's sort of intended to be like a major maritime trade hub for Arkanstotska. Like it's kind of like the Arkanstotskan version of New York City. So that's where most of our where almost all of our maritime trade comes in from. So we definitely have much more focus on the Phoenix Sea. But of course, that's totally not like the only place we focus. Like the Auburn Channel is our gateway to countries like Pradania, Korova. Now that Pax is opening up his country, the Tusakaway, all that stuff.
So how would another one from Pradice? What is the highest national honor of Arkanstotska called, and what is the history behind it?
Um, the highest military honor in Arkanstotska would have to be the Medal of Karyev's Medal, as it's more commonly called. And the history behind that is, after, during the Arkanstotskan Civil War between the Second Republic and a bunch of monarchists who wanted to restore the House of Aksakov to power again. Um, after the final after the final confrontation between both sides at the Second Battle of Liev, and the Republican victory there, and the defeat of Major Baron Gorbanov, who was the leader of the monarchist faction, Karyev wanted to honor his soldiers for their valor on the battlefield. And so he kind of he designed a medal, which I have yet to design, oh, Sealy, specifically made for them. And then over time, that just kind of ballooned into sort of like this highest national honor.
So we'll give one last shot here for audience questions, and then we're gonna wrap it up. Take a couple seconds. Last call for questions, guys. What form of transportation is most popular in Arkanstotska?
Um, the national train network is definitely the public transportation train network is definitely the most popular. Because you don't have to pay insurance on a train. But yeah, trains are definitely a big thing here. We're looking to like get help from Goyanis for improving our trains because Goyanis is the god of trains. You got to get that good stuff.
And yes, for anyone who's been living in Iraq and is unaware, Goyanas is our local train god who knows everything about trains. Well, it looks like that's about it for us today, guys. So, well, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, this has been another episode of the RP Spotlight. Thank you again for tuning in. We appreciate your interest, and we hope to see you next week, where we will have a guest from the R&B this time.